Hey everyone, welcome back to First-Hand Globetrotting. Most of the world is closed for travel right now, so I haven't had a chance to take any trips lately. It's been about 6 months since I've left my city, which I think is the longest I've ever gone without some sort of travel or road trip. So today, I'm going to be doing a bit of a throwback vlog about a trip I took to Germany in 2015. On this vacation, I visit Frankfurt, go on a boat trip down the Rhine, explore Germany's romantic road, see some incredible castles, and go to Oktoberfest in Munich. I'll warn you now, the footage and video quality isn't as good as my newer stuff, but hopefully you still enjoy following along on my trip and seeing all of the great sights. My trip started in Frankfurt. As soon as I touched down at the airport on day one, I headed into the city center to explore. I got off at the central train station and started from there. I'd never been to Frankfurt before, so I was mostly just wandering around looking for anything that caught my eye. I knew I was going to be jet-lagged, so my goal was to just keep walking around to stay awake. Frankfurt's one of the financial centers of Europe, so some parts of the city were really modern with skyscrapers towering over top. There was definitely a really interesting contrast to the city. Most parts of it had a more traditional European feeling to them, but there always seemed to be huge bank or financial company buildings staring down from above. One area that really stuck out to me was Romerburg. It's a big public square where City Hall is, and the look of it is exactly what I picture when I think of German architecture with all of the timber-framed buildings. Apparently the original buildings were damaged in the war, but the reconstructions still look really nice. As I walked around, it was hard to miss the Imperial Cathedral of St. Bartholomew sticking out from the city. There's something about old Gothic cathedrals that I think is so cool, they just look so sinister. Like most of my time exploring European cities, half the fun is just checking out the beautiful old buildings. Most of them are places I come across and not specific landmarks that I meant to find. But it's really nice to just stumble upon a memorable building that you can't help but notice. And there's always a healthy dose of old churches mixed in, especially in historic city centers. Frankfurt even has its own red light district, but if you're like me, you may not even notice you're walking through it. For lunch, I stopped by a big indoor market called Kleinmarkthalle. It's always great to wander around local markets, see what they're selling, and buy some tasty things to sample. Frankfurt is such a huge financial city, I should have guessed that they'd have a stock exchange with a bear and a bull out front. And I couldn't miss Eschenheim Tower, sticking out from the rest of the city. It's part of the old city walls, but reminded me more of a castle tower. Another beautiful building I saw was the old opera house. Apparently it's not really that old, and doesn't really host many opera performances, but it's still nice to look at even if the name is a little bit off. I made sure to get a nice view of the city from the river. It cuts right through the city, with some of the landmarks close enough that you can see them from on top of the bridge. Overall, it was definitely worth walking out there just to see a different view of Frankfurt. But for an even better and more impressive view of the city, I found an observation deck on one of the buildings. I could really see the contrast between the skyscrapers of the financial district and the older city buildings down below them. In my opinion, you really can't go wrong looking down at a city from up above, seeing how everything spreads out underneath you. I didn't really have much of a plan for my day in Frankfurt, but it was still nice to get out on the streets and wander around. I've connected through the Frankfurt airport so many times before, but until now I've never set foot outside the terminal. Honestly, I didn't even know much about the city before I got there. A one-day visit was just about a perfect length. Enough time to see the main sights and get a sense of what the city was all about. On to day 2, and I'm getting out of the city and onto the water. I took the train out to Bacharach, a small town on the Rhine River. It was a pretty small place, but the stone streets and timber houses definitely gave it a lot of charm. The whole place had a strong German feeling to it. A lot quieter and more laid back than Frankfurt, so it was exactly what I was looking for. But this wasn't my final destination, it was just the start. I was here to catch a riverboat to take me on a scenic trip down the Rhine, so I could see even more riverside towns like this one. Taking this trip was a great idea. It seemed like it was just a never-ending parade of picturesque towns sandwiched between the hills on one side and the river on the other. Plus, it felt like nearly every place we passed either had a castle perched up on a hillside or some other equally beautiful building. It was like they were all just sitting there waiting to be put on a postcard. After a few minutes on the water, you start to just expect to see more and more castles around every corner. And every once in a while there'd be a huge church sticking high above the rest of the smaller buildings in town. Another place had a big fortification tower right on the river's edge, protecting the town from any trouble. Going by boat was definitely the way to do it, but in case you have to stick to land, there's a really nice road running along the river's edge. Pretty much all of the buildings were right up against the water, with only castles and vineyards further up in the hills. But before long I was pulling into port and ready to explore another one of these cool towns along the Rhine. The place I was visiting was St. Goar. When you step off the boat, you're right at the main road. Definitely a convenient way to get into town. And across the water, there's another little town over there. I really liked St. Goar. It seemed a bit bigger than Bacharach, with nice little streets to wander down and small squares with cafes. There were plenty of shops and restaurants in the city center, so I spent some time walking around and browsing. It's just a nice, charming German town. On the boat coming into St. Goar, I saw a big castle, Rheinfels Castle, looking down over the town from the hills. And you can't go on a trip to Europe without visiting a castle or two, right? So I took the road from the city center and hiked up towards the castle so I could get a better view. It was actually bigger than I expected once I got close to it, with huge imposing stone walls. Don't expect a fancy, fully furnished castle. A lot of it is still in ruins, so mostly you're exploring the big, dark, cavernous rooms. But honestly, I find that more fun. Even the areas with collapsing walls add to the atmosphere. One of the coolest things about it is that the castle has a bunch of dark tunnels built into it for extra security. You can wander around them and explore, but make sure to bring a flashlight because some spots are nearly pitch black. I don't know what it is, but getting to go through tiny, cramped passageways in old castles just seems so fun. Even when you're just a tourist visiting, it kind of feels like an adventure. It was actually really fun just walking around the outside of the castle, seeing all of the walls and towers and archways and passages. And I liked being able to pop into the little doorways and wander over to different parts of the castle whenever I wanted. But make sure to climb to the top of the walls and go up to the main tower. Just look at this view. It's completely worth walking up a few stairs to get here. You get an unobstructed panoramic view of the Rhine River, and it gives you a fantastic angle to see the nearby towns. And remember when I was looking up at the castle from St. Goar? Well, now I get the opposite viewpoint, with the town looking so small down there. Definitely a fun place to explore and a great stop along my Rhine adventure. But all good things eventually come to an end, so near the end of the day, I got back on the boat for my return trip to Frankfurt. That's it for this part of the video. Don't worry, my German adventures aren't over yet. I still need to explore Germany's touristy romantic road, explore some really cool cities, see one of the most picture-perfect castles I've ever seen, and experience Oktoberfest in Munich. All of that stuff will be in part 2. Check the video description for a link. So far, it's been so much fun looking back on these old memories, so I hope you're enjoying this throwback vlog. If you have any questions, ask me in the comments. While you're at it, like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. On Twitter, I'm Firsthand Globe. On Instagram, I'm Firsthand Globetrotting. Follow me on there. And don't forget, it's an incredible world out there, so pick up your passport and do some firsthand globetrotting of your own.